All right, welcome to another episode of Lessons in Leadership. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that I think doesn't get talked about enough. And with the way that go to market has been evolving, the underlying theme has become that sales leadership has to be more than just hitting quotas. It's about building trust, it's about installing passion, and building loyalty with your team. And today I have with me a guest and a good friend of mine, Emilia A'bell. She is a chief revenue officer at Platform 9 and a seasoned CRO with enterprise go-to-market chops across SAP, Oracle, Nokia, and now Platform 9's Kubernetes and cloud native drive. With decades building global teams, she blends empathetic leadership with disciplined execution. She believes in high velocity growth and in leading with love. Emilia, I'm really excited to have you on today. How are you?
Thank you, Garrath. I'm doing great. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. If you can you give everybody a little bit of a background into your career and really how you've kind of formed your principles of leadership over your different stops along the way?
Yeah, sure. I started out as an engineer. I studied engineering, electrical and electronic engineering, and I was in research and development for many years in the early part of my career. And I was always drawn to the question of why are we doing this? Like we're trying to do this faster or better or whatever, but it was always what problem are we solving and who has this problem that we're solving it for? Because I just found it pointless to be given, a list of criteria and then write the code or design the circuitry or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Really wanted to know what problem we're solving. So I was very attracted to trade shows when we did them. I could talk with the real world about what we were doing and actually I'd see if there was a fit or not. I just loved doing that, like really being drawn to understanding the challenges of an audience, for example, and seeing if there was a fit. And that ultimately drew me into sales and business. What I found was just in general, when people are happy and there's unity, you'll always get better performance and it's always much more enjoyable because there's space to actually do the creative thinking that's necessary to move forward. The biggest turning point from a leadership perspective, I was fiercely independent and my original few years of selling was
Yeah.
independently selling, right? Independently making the results. But my first startup that I worked with was with a company called Portal Software. And I realized how dependent I was on the founders or the leadership to come and tell part of the story that I couldn't tell. I could tell the story with words, but I couldn't tell it with the conviction that they could because they founded that idea or they saw the problem through their own experiences. So I realized that I needed to bring them in to bring that conviction. Now I'm learning how to become dependent on others. I can't solve all those problems or bring that same level of conviction in every part of the story. And then as I moved into leadership, I realized that the teams have their own stories to tell and their own ways of doing things. But the biggest turning point for me was when I had a manager who said to me, you need to speak up. You need to do this. And no one had done that for me before to say, you need to not own it in a you're accountable place, but you need to figure this out and do it your way. And that freed me so much. That was like a pivotal moment. I was terrified. Oh my gosh, now I've got to do this and
Yeah.
be responsible for the team. But it freed me to be me and to do it the way I need to do it, and just started to see magnificent results with the team. And I started to employ that with them. And, it doesn't take long being in leadership to realize that everyone on your team have different skills, different personalities, different things that motivate them. Some people are motivated by a bit of a tough stick, and some people are utterly demotivated by that. Some people just need a little bit of dust you know, dust it off. Just being in the war zone and being told, no, 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 they're
Yeah.
deflected. How do you get them to build them back up? So realizing that everyone has their own ways and we can all get to the same destination in 5 million different ways. And is it wrong that one person picks that journey and another person picks that journey to get to the same destination?
Yeah.
You've got to give people the space to be themselves and get to the destination that, as long as it's within certain boundaries. You've got to be very clear about what the destination is, what are the boundaries, and let them find their way in that. People flourish in that, and you've got to trust them to get there too and be there for them. Let them know that you're there for them. And then what I added to that with a team when I was at Oracle was just this, right? We're going to go beyond just giving everyone the space to be who they are and get the results and outperform individually, to let's turn this into a level of camaraderie where we're actually helping each other as a team. Everyone
Yeah.
is completely independent, and needs to own their part of the result 100%. They have got to own their book of business. But, your colleague over here may be going through a problem that, or a challenge that you've just been through. So how are you going to help your colleague get through that? Right? It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're going to get a portion of that deal or a percentage of the commission of that deal because you helped. That's silly, because then you've been paid for it. Instead, let your colleague help you along the way. And what we formed with this, it was just the most incredible teaming culture that we had, and we outperformed like crazy. Um,
Yeah.
that was awesome. And but they knew that they had my shoulders to stand on as well.
Yeah.
That really helped. I became the comrade by leadership that they needed to see, and then they became that too. And when I saw
Yeah.
the results of that, I just kept doing that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I kind of pull from what you just said is ultimately you were given a certain level of agency to make critical decisions in the business. And I think a lot of times leaders are a little bit adverse, or they're a little bit timid to give their frontline employees, whether it's on the sales team, the marketing team, anywhere across the go to market, or really a certain level of agency in being able to adapt and make critical business decisions in real time. How
Right.
has that, you talked about how that moment of, giving that level of accountability really kind of put a fire underneath you. But I think going one step further and talking about it under the lens of like giving people agency, how have you seen that maybe currently at Platform 9 or in other companies that you've been at? How have you seen people react to that? And how have you seen, you've talked about the different personalities and the different motivations. How does a good sales leader know when to give somebody more agency, less agency, maybe even helping them develop the skill set of how to ask the right questions and how to know when to make those critical decisions?
That's a great question. So I've seen from one end of the spectrum to the other of it working and not working well.
Yeah.
I can tell you 1,000%, if you don't give your sales team, or anyone for that matter, enough space and agency, as you call it, to make real time decisions in the heat of a moment, they're not going to make decisions, and it's going to slow everything down, and they're going to lose confidence in themselves 100% of the time. You have to equip them, enable them, and empower them to be able to feel confident to make real time decisions on the fly. So, as leaders, I believe you have a responsibility to equip, enable, and empower. And all three of those things have different factors in that. And some people need to be equipped more than others. Some people need to be enabled more than others, or empowered more than others. So Everyone's got different skill sets and experience to bring to bear.
Yeah.
And you're responsible for turning to draw out the gold in your team members. They're individuals. They have different ways that they're going to get that drawn out of them. And you're responsible to equip, enable, and empower them to be effective in any situation, right? And if you, like I said, if you shut them down, if you don't give them the confidence to make decisions real time, they're just not. And it's going to slow things down. They're going to come back to you. I need permission for this. The moment's gone. It kills it. So,
Yeah.
mm,
And, I think I agree with you there. I think that too often enablement gets tied back to like, well, here's this Google Doc that's got
right.
links to all of our sales material, all of our workflows, our reports, etc. But we often miss that like enablement again is giving people that agency and that accountability
100%.
because a lot of times people don't even really have a clear idea of what they're actually supposed to execute on.
Yes.
And they get hit with just you're wearing multiple hats and then you're kind of under the leadership plan of build the plane as it flies. But
Right.
that only gets the plane so far. People need to have a clear direction in mind. They need to know what their destination is going to be, how we're planning to get there as an organization, and ultimately where they fit into the overall impact of that. And this goes so beyond, I think we get in today's world, especially with all of the tech and tools we've had come online the last 15 years, we get so tied into the dashboards and the metrics. And I talk about a lot about this, and I would love to hear your opinion on this because I think we see this the same way. Where over the last, let's say, 15, 20 years, as more tech has enabled organizations through automation and workflow efficiency, we've almost seen this like decoupling of leadership from the reality of what's going on at the front lines. And a lot of the feedback that you're getting, a lot of the strategic decisions that are being made, there's no real input from your frontline people, your SDRs, your BDRs, your marketing managers, et cetera, on, hey, here's actually what I'm seeing at my level. A lot of those conversations are being facilitated through your sales managers, your marketing directors, etc. And so, just like with any piece of information, if I were to tell you a story, for instance, and I asked you to go tell that story to 100 people, by the time you got to that 100th person, that story is completely different than the original story I gave you. And I think we tend to forget that when we have information living in these silos and we tend to look down the org chart for performance issues, but we never really look up in the sense that how are leadership teams tying into their frontline teams? When was the last time you just sat on, I'm not saying you have to do this every day, but when was the last time the sales director or the chief sales officer sat in on a call, like 10 calls with an SDR team? When was the last time that person sat in on a, deal with a small account that, because a lot of times executives won't come in unless the deal is big enough. And so I think there's been this decoupling, right? How have you seen that play out? And over the last few years, I think this has become a bigger problem in the sense that we're trying to solve these fundamental issues with technology, but it's not a technology problem.
First and foremost, you got to have good visibility, and dashboards and those things are fundamental to making good decisions, seeing the patterns, seeing what's working, what's not working. But it doesn't take away the need for making decisions around the instincts that you have with things as well. And I don't know why all this technology has made us so dumb. The problem is it's made us dumb instead of freeing us to spend more time,
Yeah.
see it for real, be human, and use our instincts to. Our instincts are very powerful, and just because you can't explain it doesn't mean they're wrong.
Yeah.
You got to combine the two in a more powerful, synergistic way instead of cutting out your instincts and just relying on data.
Well, to your point
Go ahead.
earlier, when we give people that accountability and we give them that agency, it gives them the ability to sharpen those instincts over time.
Right.
But and I think to your point again, when we're in these top-down cultures where it's kind of just do what you're told and you don't have that real level of enablement, we almost just we kill people's instincts. They don't know how to use them anymore. If you're it's like any good tool, right? If your instincts are a tool, if I don't use that tool, what happens to it? It gets rusty, it starts corroding, and then I have to replace it.
Right.
And we see
Right.
that play out so often.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was I think what you were highlighting there is like it's all interconnected in one way or another. And the tools, to your point, should be there to sharpen people's instincts and understanding, but not to replace it.
Correct. Correct. But on the flip side, if you don't have the data and the tooling and relying completely on your instincts, I
Yeah.
don't think that's really smart either. The tooling needs to, just like with any technology we sell, the biggest reason we're selling technology is because we're trying to automate, simplify, reduce the time it takes to do the time consuming, laborious work, just the work, right?
Yeah.
We can take that away to free you up to do higher value work. That's what every technology is. That's the sales pitch of every technology. Let us take the grunt work away from you so you can do higher value work. So why is it different for us as leaders? We're going to give you technology to make you dumb, or we're going to give you technology to free you up to do the high value work, which is to inspire, to guide, to lead, to connect, to all those human things. I'm sorry, we're human. Let's be human. And I think that human connection is very important. I mean, if you think about, it's an old analogy, but I'm going to use this it just makes the point clear. Anyone that tells you about an inspiring leader that they really were inspired by, I can almost guarantee that it would be a story around how the CEO took the time to walk the shop floor. The
Yeah.
CEO walked through, the corridors or whatever and said hello to the team and stopped and asked, how's your day going? How are your calls? That that is when people get inspired because they realize that the leader who is many levels above and disconnected through so many levels takes the time to meet the people doing the work. They sit on exactly what you said. They sit on the calls. They take some of the calls
Yeah. That's a shocking. Yeah.
done every day. Otherwise, you don't have time to do your leadership role. But
Yeah.
from time to time, make those connections, and they're the stories you hear when people are inspired by leadership.
Well, it makes me think of, you know, somebody it makes me think of is Henry Ford.
Right.
And, we talk about how innovative of a person he was for his time, but ultimately, what was he doing? He was walking the shop floor every day. He was hands-on at the front lines with his employees, understanding where, hey, okay, hey, this is a bottleneck in our operations right here. How can we make this better so the employees can operate at a high level? And I think a lot of that, especially with like the whole founder-led go-to-market motion or executive-led go-to-market motion that's come out and really become prevalent the last few years, the focus almost gets put on, hey, this is our CEO is our cheerleader. Our CEO is, they need to be focused on going to speaking events and writing books and creating content. And it takes you away from the real focus of the business. You have a much more powerful story to tell and a much more impactful story to share if you're at the front lines with your people, because the real innovation in technology in any business or industry really is there's rarely going to be an Amazon level moment.
Right.
The real innovation is going to happen in these small nooks and crannies that nobody else is paying attention to. And that's your real opportunity cost. When leaders and the innovators in the business are disconnected from what's happening at the front lines, you're ultimately missing out on those actual moments of innovation for the company.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, if the leaders are micromanaging and taking over,
Yeah,
disempowered and discouraged, and you've shut down, you've taken away that enablement, empowerment from them as
absolutely.
well. So that's a trap that I've seen many people fall into as well. So it's if you are in the front as a leader, if you are in the front lines with the team, are you what is it for? Is it because you don't trust them and you're doing it for them?
Yeah.
Or are you there to inspire them, show them, give them the space to try it, let them fail, correct? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you there for? That's the point. What are you there for?
Exactly. I think what's your opinion on, how would you build a culture to where, and I think this is where we're getting to with this conversation is, we've talked about trust, we've talked about agency, we've talked a little bit about innovation now and how leadership facilitates a lot of that. But in order for all of that to happen, and like you're saying, employees aren't feeling micromanaged, how do you build your culture in a way, or because I don't think you could build a culture. I think it has to be just continually developed and evolving. How do you kind of balance that out to where I instinctively know, my marketing director or my sales director, they're not over here to micromanage me. They're over here to see how they can better enable me, or to
Right.
see how we can actually make the product better or make the experience better. Because sometimes you can't communicate all of that. A lot of times you can't communicate all of that. It's just people acting on their instincts in a lot of ways. And so how do we like prevent that crossover from happening where maybe an employee or maybe a sales rep or a BDR, whoever might feel, well, hey, you're stepping on my toes. I can't do my job because you're micromanaging me.
I don't think it's a cut and dried answer, but
Yeah.
I do think it comes back to it comes to is it a punitive environment or is it a rewarding environment? Are you rewarding people for their growth or are you punishing them for their failures?
That's
There's a
such a distinction.
Yeah, there's a place for punishment. I don't, if you're not getting the performance, you've got bad attitude, whatever, right? So what are you doing to, as a leader, now you're responsible for equipping, enabling, and empowering that person who's not performing. Is it a skills issue? Well, work on that, put them on training or whatever it is. Is it
Yeah.
an attitude? What's going on? Why? Maybe because they feel like they don't have room to make the decisions in real time they need, or maybe they're just not, they've got a bad attitude, they're always going to have a bad attitude, whatever it is. Figure it out, give people a chance to get in the right frame of mind and with the skills they need. But yeah, I would say you've got to decide, are you a punitive culture or a rewarding culture? And make sure that it's very clear what KPIs and OKRs and the guidelines are, and give the vision. People need to know where they're going and the guardrails. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, when people know their boundaries, they flourish in that.
Yep.
Right? Give them enough space between the boundaries to do what they need to do. Show them where they're going. Get them excited, not get them excited about the vision. Let them be part of being excited about the vision. They're there because they believe in the ultimate opportunity that's at hand, right? So how, as an organization, are we going to get there, and how is this team going to contribute, and how is your role going to fit in there? If you give them that context, that, all right, here's another wonderful example that I use all the time. So if I'm driving a car and the passenger is directing me and they're saying, okay, get in the left lane. okay, turn the blinker on and turn left, I'm just going to get utterly frustrated because I'm like, where are we going? I'll decide when I need to change lanes and turn the blinker on. I need more space to make a decision so I can see how many cars are behind me, in front of me, and so on. So that's
Absolutely.
kind of micromanaging thing. And then it's, oh, why didn't you change lanes? Well, there was a car right there. Well, we're going to miss the left turn. Well, I didn't know there was a left turn coming. I didn't know that. Give them enough vision so they can maneuver as they need. Don't overwhelm either. Like, don't give them
Yeah.
too, you know what I mean? So there's no right answer.
I think it comes down to, what's the kind of, we have to start by asking ourselves, what's the kind of culture that we want to build? Going back to what you were saying about, do you want to have a punitive culture where people are afraid to, underperform? We don't know what they have going on in their personal life. And I know we want
right,
to act like, that's not my problem. Personal life can't spill over into work. But the reality is it does, because we're all human beings and it's just basic
right.
human psychology and behavioral
Hmm,
traits that, some of that stuff is going to spill over. Somebody's going through a divorce, going to be probably pretty hard for them to hit their quota that quarter, and
right,
a lot of times we're asking people to have, as I look at leadership teams, I look at the leadership teams. I think I shared a story with you last time that was such a turning point in my career for how I understood leadership, especially coming out of the military, where it can be a very punitive culture. And, I was working on a Salesforce project. I implemented, I transferred the wrong database over to the wrong client account. And I mean, I was in utter dismay. In the moment when I hit it, I knew I made a mistake. And I saw myself getting fired. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a kid on the way. How am I going to make it through all of this? I'm like, I'm only 6 months in here, and like this little mistake that, should have never happened. And so I wait like 20 minutes. I'm just like collecting my thoughts. I go into our IT director's office and, I tell him about it. And he goes, Garrath, I want you to do something. He's like, do you golf? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I want you to go home. I want you to grab your clubs and go play a round of golf, and I'll see you tomorrow. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what the hell is going on right now? Like I was so used to this like punitive culture type of treatment. And I'm at the golf course later that afternoon and I'm like, I'm going to get fired playing golf. That's what they're going to do. They're going to call me and they're going to fire me while I'm playing a freaking round of golf. And I was like, this is all a setup, so I ended up calling him and he's like, Garrath, listen, it's all good. He's like, you clearly care about doing things the right way. You made a mistake, and I can tell right now you're not going to make this mistake again. I trust you going forward to handle this, and it's fine. We've got it taken care of. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. Enjoy your round of golf. And I just could not get that out of it. It was almost like a reverse Uno card that he had thrown on my table of like, I didn't know how to handle that situation because it was the first time in my career that a leader had showed a little bit of empathy, a little bit of sincerity around, hey man, I get it. I get it. You're just trying to do your job. You have a kid on the way. You just graduated college. All of these things going on in your life. You're moving into a new house and you're trying to get your work done. You're trying to stay on top of things and you made in the big picture of things, you made a small mistake, right? And so I think as leaders, the way that we present ourselves in those situations, our presence in those situations, how we use our words, how we decide to take a step back before we get upset, before we get heated. Okay, who has this individual proven to be to me? Is this a high
right,
performer that just made a small mistake? Is this somebody that we've struggled to motivate, whatever that may be? And I think being more adaptable to the situations and not being so locked into, you see all these leadership frameworks out there, et cetera. Just like scratch the
right.
leadership frameworks and just start really trying to understand the individual human beings that are in front of you.
Well, you touched on trust. I think that if you don't have trust, it's really hard to have the environment. But trust is not automatic, right? Trust does take time to build trust. But if you don't have it, it's a killer. Now, for whatever reason, your manager trusted that you, first of all, he felt he could solve the problem
Yeah.
clearly. Whereas he might have been a slightly different situation there,
Yeah.
but he also trusted you to be the guy he needed you to be tomorrow and in the future, and knew from your reaction and all those things that it was, you weren't going to make that mistake again. And I imagine that you trusted him more after that event
Sure.
too.
Absolutely. Just knowing that
And
your leaders have your back.
have your back. That's
Mhm.
right. The camaraderie is so important. And it takes time to build that, because it takes time to build trust. But if you make that something that's important, then as a leader, you can work towards building that. My husband was clearance diver in the Australian Navy, and much of their training in the early days was about building trust and teamwork. And the things that they got, the punitive actions were not because they individually did something wrong or not up to standard. Yes, they did something wrong or not up to standard, but the reason it was important was it would let the team down ultimately, right?
Exactly.
And so if you look at it that way and you help them understand that what they did was good or bad, um, in and of itself, yes, but the reason it was good or bad is it affected the team and the outcome in a particular way. And now you're giving them context, a greater vision, and an understanding. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, is always bringing it back to the bigger picture. Where are we going? How did it impact? How does it not impact? How does it impact the team? How does it impact the team morale? How does it impact? One guy, my husband told me a story, one guy forgot his water bottle. They were doing a training mission somewhere, just forgot his water bottle. And he got annihilated for it when the Chiefs realized he didn't have it. And he said, well, if I get thirsty, I get thirsty. I'll just suffer that. And they got ripped apart, say, but you're letting the team down now, because if you can't keep up with the team, or if someone needs you or needs your water and you don't, so it's not about you, it's about how you're letting the team down, right? That it's really going, I think it requires incredible intellect and incredible depth of leadership to be able to take it to that level of camaraderie. What does that look like? And I think that's where you can really flourish. um, One guy, again, I've got all these great stories from the military, because that's where I'm also learning some of these concepts from.
Yeah.
He went through Hell Week.
Yeah.
One of the guys got through, one of the guys passed every test, everything, and they failed him. And everyone was horrified. How did they fail this guy? And the answer was, he was stronger than everyone else, and he only did enough to get him through. He had a responsibility to get everyone else through because he was
Yeah.
stronger. So he had to
Yeah.
do it again, which is a horrible thing to have to do
Yeah.
again. And he passed it the next time. But I learned that lesson, that it's not about him, it's about the team. And you
Yeah.
all have to play your part and play to your strengths. And if you have weaknesses, you have to show your vulnerability there to allow the others to come in and help bridge that gap.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue into my last question. And that is, how do you think, or how have you as a leader evolved? Like, you know, I think we all start out with what when we first get put in a leadership position, it's kind of like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. What do you think, or what have you seen within you that has been your biggest point of evolution as a leader, let's say over the last 15, 20 years?
The higher up you go, the less functions you know well, because there's a broader set of functions that you become responsible for.
Yeah.
So surrounding yourself with people better than you have to be confident in yourself to do that, but you need to know that there's no way that you can know more on a particular topic that you haven't, my stream has been through sales, right? How would I know anything about product management, for example, right? So for me to think I know better is just arrogance. Hire people in those functions that know that they're the best, they're better than you, and trust them. And build build the camaraderie through lots of communication and understanding of where we're all going and why things are. You educate each other and so on. So not being afraid to hire better than you,
Yeah.
and making sure that they know you've got their back, making sure that they know where the vision is, where they're going, because if they don't know the vision, everyone's going off in different
Yeah.
directions, and helping each other be sensitive to what everyone else is going through.
We talked so much about trust and accountability and agency, but I think all of that part of the conversation really led us to what you just kind of highlighted as, the downstream effects when we actually instill those things in an organization. When there are times that we have to enforce our standard, it's not because we want to berate you. It's not because we don't like you, and it's not because we want to berate you. It's because collectively as a team, we all have to live up to a certain standard. And we can only accept, and as a team, our culture as a team is what we're willing to accept as the lowest standard.
Mm.
And so I think that's where so much of some of those old school leadership principles are starting to come back a little bit. And that leadership can't be all woo-saw and glad hands. There has to be some level of enforcement and accountability there. There has to be, again, talking about standards collectively as a team, what do our standards represent as a team?
And why do we have those? What is the impact of us not meeting those standards, and what is the impact of us meeting those standards?
Absolutely. Amelia, it was awesome having this conversation with you. I knew when we had our first conversation, I was like, I definitely got to talk to her more about this. Outside of LinkedIn, where can people find you?
LinkedIn's the best place, honestly.
Okay.
Really, yeah. Thank
All
you.
right. When I post this on YouTube, I will post a link to your LinkedIn account in the
Thank
comments section. So if you guys want to find Amelia, look down in look down in the description, and I'll have a link to her account, and you can connect with her there. Amelia, thank you so much for coming on with us today, and I look forward to staying in touch with you. All right.
thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
Yep. You too.